A millionaire and a cleaning lady got stuck in an elevator. But what seemed like just a minor setback quickly turns out to be part of something much bigger. A conversation with a stranger reveals secrets he never admitted. What happened inside that elevator will surprise you. Alexander Sterling stared at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office on the 47th floor. The golden hour cast long shadows across the city, but he couldn't appreciate the view. His mind was consumed by the stack of documents on his desk, evidence of betrayal that threatened to destroy everything he'd built over the past 2 decades. "Mr. Sterling," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, "the board members are requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. He pressed the button harder than necessary. "Tell them I'll be there." His voice remained steady, masking the turmoil beneath the surface. If this story caught your interest, watch until the end and subscribe to the channel to receive all our exciting stories. Continuing. The Sterling fashion empire, built from scratch through years of relentless work and sacrifice, was facing its darkest hour. Sales were plummeting, investors were pulling out, and worst of all, his revolutionary design for the upcoming season, the one that could save everything, had vanished without a trace. Alexander loosened his Italian silk tie and ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. At 45, he'd achieved what most people could only dream of, but now it was slipping through his fingers like sand. The betrayal cut deeper because it came from within. His own partners, people he'd trusted, had orchestrated this downfall. "Sir," his assistant appeared at the door. "Security confirmed what we suspected. Someone accessed the design vault last week using executive clearance." "Which executive?" Alexander's jaw tightened. The system logs were conveniently corrupted. Of course they were. Alexander dismissed his assistant and poured himself a glass of water, ignoring the expensive scotch that usually helped him through difficult evenings. He needed clarity tonight. The computer screen flickered with emails from concerned shareholders. The stock had dropped another 15% today alone. His competitors, vultures that they were, had already begun circling, preparing to divide his empire among themselves. Hours passed as he combed through financial reports, looking for a way out. The night cleaning crew had started their rounds, their distant vacuum cleaners a reminder that he was staying far too late again. Finally, exhausted and with no solutions in sight, he gathered his things to leave. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Alexander stepped inside, his mind still racing through possible scenarios for tomorrow's board meeting. He barely registered the young woman in a cleaning uniform who entered after him, carrying supplies and a worn notebook. The doors closed. Alexander pressed the button for the lobby, and the elevator began its descent. The woman stood quietly in her corner, seemingly lost in thought. The silence felt heavy, matching his mood. Then, without warning, the elevator shuddered violently. Alexander grabbed the handrail as the lights flickered. With a grinding sound that sent chills down his spine, the elevator jerked to a complete stop. "No, no, no," Alexander muttered, pressing the emergency button repeatedly. The small space suddenly felt suffocating. His breathing quickened as the reality of being trapped set in. "It happens sometimes," the young woman spoke, her voice surprisingly calm. "The maintenance team will get us out soon." Alexander barely heard her. The walls seemed to be closing in, and his tie felt like it was choking him. He hadn't felt this way since. "Are you all right, sir?" The woman's voice cut through his rising panic. He wanted to maintain his composure, to be the powerful CEO he was supposed to be, but the combination of the day's stress and his hidden fear of enclosed spaces was becoming overwhelming. "I'm fine," he managed to say, though his slightly trembling hands betrayed him. The young woman studied him for a moment, then opened her notebook and began speaking in a conversational tone. "Did you know that the average elevator ride in New York takes about 118 seconds? Someone actually studied this." Alexander looked at her, momentarily distracted from his anxiety. "What?" "And apparently there are more elevators in New York City than in any other city in America. Over 70,000 of them." She smiled slightly, continuing to write something in her notebook. Against his will, Alexander found himself drawn into the conversation. That's interesting. Where did you learn that? I read a lot. When you spend as much time in elevators as I do, you tend to learn about them. She glanced up from her notebook. I'm Elena, by the way. Elena Martinez. The simple exchange helped steady his breathing. Elena continued sharing random facts, her voice steady and calming. Eventually, Alexander found himself leaning against the wall, his panic subsiding enough to notice the strange metallic sounds coming from above them. Does that sound normal to you? He asked, looking up at the ceiling. Elena paused in her writing. What sound? But before he could answer, the elevator jerked back to life and the lights stabilized. A few moments later, they reached the lobby. As the doors opened, Alexander stepped out, then turned back to thank Eleanor, but she was already walking away, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. He watched her disappear around a corner, an odd feeling nagging at him. Something about this encounter felt orchestrated, but with tomorrow's crisis looming, he pushed the thought aside and headed for his waiting car, unaware that this chance meeting would change everything. The Sterling Fashion headquarters buzzed with tension the next morning. Alexander arrived early, his encounter in the elevator almost forgotten amidst the looming board meeting. Almost, but not quite. Something about Eleanor's calm demeanor and that mysterious notebook lingered in his thoughts. Mr. Sterling? His assistant hurried toward him, tablet in hand. The board members are already here. And it's not good. They've been reviewing the quarterly projections. Alexander straightened his tie and took a deep breath. Let's get this over with. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. 12 faces turned to look at him, some concerned, others barely concealing their hostility. Marcus Reynolds, his longest-standing partner, sat at the far end, his expression unreadable. Alexander, Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of authority he'd never possessed before the company's troubles. We've been reviewing the situation. The numbers are worse than expected. The numbers tell only part of the story, Alexander countered, opening his briefcase. If we proceed with the launch of our new design. What new design? Victoria. Chen, another board member, interrupted. The one that mysteriously vanished, or do you have another miracle solution hidden away? Alexander studied Victoria's face carefully. She'd been unusually interested in the company's creative direction, lately making frequent visits to the design department. Could she be involved in the theft? Our competitors are preparing to launch their winter collections, Marcus continued. Without a breakthrough design, we'll lose our position in the market. The board has prepared a contingency plan. A contingency plan? Alexander's voice remained steady, but his fingers pressed hard against the leather portfolio in his hands. Victoria slid a document across the table. We're proposing a merger with Reynolds Chen Fashion Group. They're prepared to absorb Sterling Fashion and maintain some of our key operations. The piece finally fell into place. Marcus and Victoria had orchestrated everything. The sabotage, the stolen design, the investor panic. They'd created the crisis to force this exact moment. This company isn't just a name on the stock exchange, Alexander spoke, his voice carrying across the silent room. We employ thousands of people. We've built something that represents innovation and creativity in fashion. Sentiment won't save jobs, Alexander, Marcus replied. We need practical solutions. As the meeting continued, Alexander's mind raced. He needed time. Time to expose the betrayal, time to find a new design, time to save his company. But time was the one thing he didn't have. The elevator incident from the previous night flashed in his mind again. Elena's notebook. There had been sketches in it. He'd caught a glimpse when she was trying to distract him from his claustrophobia. After 2 grueling hours, the board granted him 1 week to present a viable alternative to the merger. 1 week to save everything he'd built. Later that afternoon, Alexander stood in his office watching rain streak down the windows. His assistant entered with a stack of employee files. Sir, I pulled the records you requested. Elena Martinez has worked here for 8 months as part of the night cleaning crew. No prior experience in fashion or design, but what? Her employee file seems incomplete. Basic information is missing and her references don't check out. It's as if someone rushed her paperwork through the system. Alexander frowned. Find out who hired her. And get me security footage from last night's elevator incident. That's another strange thing, sir. The cameras in that elevator were down for maintenance last night. The only working camera caught her entering the building at 6 p.m. and leaving at midnight. Every new piece of information about Elena raised more questions. Who was she really? Those sketches he'd glimpsed, could they be more than just idle doodles? Alexander made his way to the maintenance department, where he found the elevator technician who'd responded to last night's emergency. "Strange thing, Mr. Sterling," the technician said, scratching his head. "We couldn't find any mechanical problems. The elevator's computer showed some unauthorized access attempts around the time you were stuck, but there's no way to trace who did it." Back in his office, Alexander pulled up the company's security logs. Eleanor's access card had been used throughout the building over the past months, including several times in the design department, always late at night when the building was nearly empty. He was about to dig deeper when his phone buzzed with a news alert. His heart nearly stopped as he read the headline, "Reynolds Chen Fashion Group announces revolutionary winter collection preview." Attached was a photo that made his blood run cold. The design was eerily familiar, similar to his stolen concept, but with subtle differences that made it even better. The styling, the innovation, the attention to detail, it was brilliant, but something about it tugged at his memory. The flowing lines, the unique approach to structure, they reminded him of the quick glimpse he'd caught of Elena's notebook sketches. Alexander grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. He needed to find Elena Martinez, and he needed to find her now. But as he pressed the lobby button, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being played in a game whose rules he didn't understand. The elevator descended smoothly this time, no mysterious malfunctions. Yet somehow this normal journey felt more unsettling than last night's drama. Somewhere in his building, behind the perfectly maintained corporate facade, a story was unfolding that would either save or destroy everything he'd worked for. And at the center of it all was a cleaning lady with a mysterious notebook and a talent that could change everything. The maintenance corridors of Sterling Fashion's building felt like a maze. Alexander had never ventured into these back areas before, where cleaning supplies were stored and break rooms were tucked away in forgotten corners. After 2 hours of searching and questioning staff members, he finally got a lead on Elena's whereabouts. "She usually takes her break in the old design storage room on the 19th floor, a janitor told him. "Strange place to rest if you ask me, but she says she likes the quiet." The 19th floor had been partially abandoned during recent budget cuts. As Alexander stepped out of the service elevator, motion sensor lights flickered to life, illuminating a hallway lined with archived fashion collections beneath dust covers. He found Elena sitting cross-legged on the floor, her notebook open on her lap. Sketches surrounded her, dozens of them, spread out on the ground like fallen leaves. When she looked up, her expression showed no surprise at his presence. "I was wondering how long it would take you to find me," she said, carefully closing her notebook. Alexander's gaze swept over the sketches. They were extraordinary. Innovative designs that blended classic elegance with modern edge, exactly what his company needed. "You're not really a cleaning lady, are you?" Elena smiled sadly. "I am exactly what my employee badge says I am, Mr. Sterling. The cleaning position was the only job available when I applied." "But these designs..." He picked up one of the sketches. "This is professional work. You're trained in fashion design?" "Fashion Institute of Technology, full scholarship, graduated top of my class 3 years ago." She began gathering her sketches. Then reality hit. Every major fashion house, including yours, rejected my applications. Apparently, a scholarship student from Queens doesn't fit their image of a designer. Alexander felt a twinge of guilt, remembering how many portfolios his HR department rejected without his review. "Why didn't you mention your qualifications when you applied for the cleaning position? Would it have mattered?" Elena's voice carried no bitterness, only resignation. "Besides, this job gave me something more valuable, access. Every night while cleaning the design department, I could study the process, understand how ideas moved from sketch to production." And the elevator incident? Alexander watched her carefully. Was that planned too? Elena met his gaze steadily. Sometimes opportunity presents itself in unexpected ways. I needed you to see me as a person, not just another invisible worker. The elevator malfunction wasn't my doing, but I made the most of our time there. Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed. Another news alert about Reynolds Chen's upcoming collection. The images showed more designs, each one more impressive than the last. They're going to destroy sterling fashion with these, he muttered, showing Elena the photos. She glanced at them and laughed softly. No, they won't. Look closer, Mr. Sterling. Those designs won't work in production. The proportions are wrong, the fabric choice is impractical. They rushed to copy an unfinished concept without understanding the technical requirements. Alexander studied the images again, seeing what she meant. You knew this would happen? I suspected. Corporate espionage isn't as clever as people think. They stole early drafts, not the final designs. Elena stood, brushing dust from her uniform. The real designs, the ones that will work, those are right here. She tapped her notebook. Why show me now? Why not come forward earlier? Because earlier, you wouldn't have listened. You needed to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to have your work stolen and credited to others. She handed him a folder. These are copies of my complete designs with all technical specifications. Use them if you want. Alexander opened the folder, his eyes widening as he reviewed page after page of brilliant work. This could save the company. But why help me after everything? Because despite everything, sterling fashion still represents something important in the industry. And because during our time in that elevator, you showed me something rare in people of your position: humanity. Eleanor gathered her things. But understand this. If you use these designs, I want full credit. No hiding behind corporate ownership or executive decisions. The world needs to see that talent can come from anywhere. Alexander looked from the designs to Eleanor, seeing her in a new light. She wasn't just fighting for recognition, she was challenging the entire system that had kept talented designers like her on the outside. What about Reynolds and Chen? They'll claim we stole their designs. Elena smiled, a confident gleam in her eye. Let them. I've documented every step of my design process, dated and witnessed, plus I have something they don't, an understanding of how to make these designs actually work. As they stood in that dusty room, surrounded by fashion's past, and possibly its future, Alexander realized the choice before him wasn't just about saving his company. It was about changing the industry itself. We'll need to move fast, he said, already formulating a plan. The board meeting is in 5 days. Then we better get started, Eleanor replied, opening her notebook to reveal more designs. But remember, Mr. Sterling, this is a partnership, not a takeover. Are you ready to change how things work in your world? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and challenge. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle as evening approached, but in that moment both knew they were on the verge of something revolutionary, if they could trust each other enough to make it happen. The next morning, Alexander's private office had been transformed. Design sketches covered every surface, and a makeshift workspace had been created for Elena. The contrast between her cleaning uniform and the elegant office furniture seemed to emphasize the unusual nature of their alliance. We need to move the production timeline up, Elena explained, pointing to technical drawings. Reynolds Chen will try to rush their collection to market, but they'll run into manufacturing problems. That's our window. Alexander studied the production schedules. Our usual factories are booked solid. Even with my connections, it would take weeks to... Who said anything about usual factories? Elena interrupted, pulling out a list from her notebook. There are dozens of smaller manufacturing facilities in the tri-state area, skilled craftspeople who've been ignored by the major fashion houses. I've been researching them for months. Smaller facilities mean higher costs, more coordination, and better quality, Elena finished, plus loyalty. These workshops have been waiting for an opportunity like this. They'll prioritize our order because they have something to prove. Alexander was about to respond when his assistant burst in. Sir, Marcus Reynolds is here. He's demanding to see you." Eleanor quickly gathered her sketches, but before she could leave, Marcus pushed past the assistant into the office. He stopped short at the sight of Elena. "Having your cleaning staff help with design now, Alexander," Marcus sneered. "Things must be worse than I thought." Alexander felt Elena stiffen beside him, but kept his voice calm. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Just checking how our future acquisition is doing. The board seems quite interested in our upcoming collection." Marcus's eyes wandered to the sketches on the desk. "Working on something new." "You could say that," Alexander replied carefully. "Though I suggest you worry more about your own collection. I hear there might be some production challenges." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Marcus's face. "What are you talking about?" "Let's just say that stealing designs is easy. Making them work is another matter entirely." Alexander stepped forward. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." After Marcus left, Eleanor emerged from behind a display panel. "He took photos with his phone when you weren't looking. He'll know we're planning something." "Good," Alexander said. "Let him worry. But we need to move fast. Can you have the complete technical packages ready by tomorrow?" Elena nodded. "Already done, but there's another problem. The design team, your current one, they won't accept me easily." She was right. The Sterling fashion design department was notorious for its hierarchy and exclusivity. Having an outsider, especially one who had been working as cleaning staff, suddenly take a leading role would cause chaos. "Then we don't tell them everything yet," Alexander decided. "You'll work directly with me as a special consultant. Meanwhile, I'll start reaching out to these workshops on your list." They worked through the night, fine-tuning designs and making calls. Eleanor's knowledge of the industry's hidden talents proved invaluable. By dawn, they had commitments from 3 prestigious small workshops and a revolutionary production schedule that could beat Reynolds Chen to market. But their progress was interrupted by an urgent call from HR. Someone had leaked Elena's employment details to fashion blogs, painting her as an industrial spy. Social media was buzzing with speculation about the mysterious cleaning lady working in the CEO's office. "They're trying to discredit you before we can even begin," Alexander realized, scanning the online posts. Elena seemed unfazed. "Actually, this might work in our favor. The fashion world loves an underdog story. We just need to control the narrative." "How?" "By telling the truth, part of it anyway. Let them talk about the cleaning lady with design dreams. Let them underestimate us." She smiled. "It'll make the reveal even more dramatic." Alexander watched her quick, confident movements as she organized their work. In just days, she had transformed from an invisible presence in his building to someone who might help save everything. But there was still something that bothered him. "The elevator incident," he said. "You never really explained how you knew I'd be there that night." Elena paused in her work. "Sometimes the best opportunities come from paying attention. I knew about your late-night habits, your schedule. The elevator problems were genuine. I just chose the right moment to be there. And the notebook, the sketches I glimpsed? A calculated risk. I needed you to see enough to be intrigued, but not enough to feel threatened." She met his gaze. "I've spent months watching how power works in this building, Mr. Sterling. Sometimes the best way to be seen is to stay invisible until the right moment." Their conversation was interrupted by another urgent message. Reynolds Chen had announced their collection launch date, just 2 weeks away. The stakes had suddenly become very real. "We'll need to work around the clock," Elena said, studying the announcement. Alexander looked at their scattered work, the evidence of their overnight planning. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. Your life will change completely." Elena picked up her trusted notebook, running her fingers over its worn cover. "My life changed the moment I decided to stop waiting for opportunities and create my own. The question is, are you ready for your life to change too?" The morning sun streamed through the office windows, illuminating the space between them, a space that had once separated their worlds but now held the possibility of something extraordinary. They both knew that what they were attempting could either revolutionize the fashion industry or end both their careers. And somewhere in the building, Marcus was probably already plotting his next move, unaware that his attempts to destroy Sterling fashion might have accidentally sparked its greatest transformation. The Sterling fashion design department buzzed with nervous energy. Rumors about Elena had spread like wildfire, and the arrival of mysterious fabric samples from unknown workshops only fueled the speculation. Senior designers exchanged worried glances as Alexander led Elena through the floor, introducing her as a creative consultant. "This is unprecedented," Charlotte Weber, the head designer, cornered Alexander after the morning briefing. "You can't seriously expect us to work with a cleaning lady, no matter how talented she claims to be." "I expect you to work with whoever I bring into this team," Alexander replied firmly. "Elena's designs speak for themselves. But the reputation of our brand needs innovation more than it needs outdated prejudices," Alexander cut her off. "Unless you have a better solution to counter Reynolds Chen's upcoming collection?" Charlotte's silence spoke volumes. The design team had failed to produce anything revolutionary in months, and they knew it. Still, their resistance was palpable as Elena began reviewing their current projects. Meanwhile, Elena focused on the work, methodically going through each design with a precision that surprised even Alexander. She found flaws in supposedly finished pieces and suggested improvements that were both innovative and practical. Despite their initial skepticism, some younger designers began asking her questions, drawn to her deep technical knowledge. "These shoulder seams won't lay properly in production," Elena explained to a group of junior designers, sketching quick alternatives. "But if we modify the cut here and here, we can achieve the same effect while making it easier to manufacture." Alexander watched from his office as Elena gradually won over the more open-minded team members. But not everyone was convinced. He overheard whispers about maintaining standards and proper channels. The situation grew more complicated when Victoria Chen made an unexpected visit to the design floor. She walked straight to Elena, who was deep in discussion with pattern makers. "Miss Martinez," Victoria's voice dripped with false warmth, "how fascinating to meet you properly. I understand you've had quite the journey from cleaning floors to designing clothes." Elena met her gaze steadily. "Sometimes the best view of a building comes from cleaning its windows, Miss Chen. You notice things others miss." "Indeed." Victoria's smile tightened. "I just hope you understand what you're getting into. The fashion world can be quite unforgiving to outsiders." Before Elena could respond, an urgent message arrived from one of their new workshop partners. Reynolds Chen had just offered them an exclusive contract with a significant signing bonus. The workshop owner was apologetic, but couldn't refuse such an offer. "They're trying to cut off our production capabilities," Alexander realized, reviewing similar messages from other workshops. Victoria's visit was just a distraction. Elena quickly pulled out her notebook. "We still have options. There's a workshop in Brooklyn. They're smaller but highly skilled. The owner, Mrs. Garcia, she's been waiting for an opportunity to prove herself. Can they handle our volume? With some adjustments to the production schedule, yes, and they have connections with other small workshops that could form a manufacturing collective." As they rushed to salvage their production plans, Charlotte appeared with more unsettling news. Someone had leaked Elena's old design school rejection letters to fashion blogs, along with suggestions that she had plagiarized her portfolio. "Social media is having a field day," Charlotte reported, almost smugly. "Every major fashion site is questioning her credentials." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she read the online accusations, but her voice remained steady. "They're trying to discredit me before they even see the designs. Classic misdirection." Alexander felt a surge of protective anger. "We can fight this. Issue statements, show evidence of your work." "No," Eleanor interrupted. "Let them talk. Every minute they spend trying to discredit my background is a minute they're not focusing on what we're actually doing. Besides," she smiled slightly, "they're giving us free publicity." But Alexander could see the toll it was taking on her. Later that evening, he found her alone in the design room, staring at her reflection in the window. "Maybe they're right," she said quietly. Maybe I'm being presumptuous, thinking I could step into this world so easily. You're not stepping into their world, Alexander replied. You're helping to create a new one. That's what scares them. Elena turned to face him, and for a moment, her usual confidence wavered. Why are you risking everything on me? Your company, your reputation? Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Alexander moved closer. This industry isn't about maintaining barriers. It's about breaking them down, about seeing beauty and talent in unexpected places. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them. The late evening light cast long shadows across the design room, but neither moved to turn on the lights. For a moment, they weren't CEO and designer, or rich man and former cleaning lady. They were just two people standing on the edge of something transformative. The moment was broken by an urgent email. Reynolds Chen had moved up their collection launch date again. They now had less than 10 days to pull off what seemed impossible. We need to call Mrs. Garcia, Elena said, returning to business mode. If we're going to do this, we need to start tonight. As they began their late-night planning session, neither mentioned the moment they'd shared. But something had changed, adding another layer of complexity to their already complicated partnership. The question was whether this change would strengthen their alliance or become another vulnerability their enemies could exploit. Mrs. Garcia's workshop in Brooklyn hummed with activity well past midnight. Sewing machines whirred as skilled hands transformed Elena's designs into reality. The small space was cramped but efficient, with every surface covered in fabric samples and pattern pieces. The construction is perfect, Elena said, examining a nearly finished prototype. Your team's craftsmanship is exactly what these designs need. The elderly workshop owner beamed with pride. For 20 years, the big fashion houses ignored us, said we were too small, too traditional. But some things can only be done by hand, with care. Alexander watched the interaction, amazed at how Elena had united these skilled artisans into a passionate team. In just days, she had created a network of small workshops that worked together seamlessly, each contributing their specialized skills to the collection. But their progress was interrupted by an urgent call from Sterling Fashion's legal department. Reynolds Chen had filed a preliminary injunction claiming intellectual property theft. They're trying to stop production before we can launch, Alexander explained to Elena after the call. They're demanding access to our workshops for inspection. Elena's face hardened. They want to intimidate Mrs. Garcia and the others, make them afraid to work with us. The judge will rule on the injunction tomorrow morning. If we lose, then we need to make sure we have enough pieces completed before any potential shutdown, Elena finished. She turned to Mrs. Garcia. How many hours do you need to finish the key pieces? With all hands working through the night, maybe 8 hours? Alexander checked his watch. That's cutting it close to the court hearing. Then we better not waste any time, Elena said, already rolling up her sleeves to help with the work. Throughout the night, Alexander witnessed something extraordinary. Elena moved between workstations, adjusting details, solving problems, and encouraging the tired workers. Her technical knowledge, combined with genuine respect for their skills, had earned their unwavering loyalty. As dawn approached, Charlotte from the design team unexpectedly arrived at the workshop. She stood in the doorway, taking in the scene before her. I came to see for myself, she said, approaching a nearly finished piece. Her expert eyes examined the construction. This is exceptional work. Elena tensed, waiting for criticism, but Charlotte continued, the way you've combined traditional techniques with modern design, I've never seen anything like it. Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Alexander asked. Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. The design team may have our pride, but we also have our integrity. What Reynolds Chen is doing, it's wrong. And these designs, she gestured to the collection, they're clearly original work. The morning. Sun was rising as they finished the core pieces of the collection. Alexander received a message that the board was calling an emergency meeting, demanding to know why he was risking the company's reputation on an unproven designer. Go, Elena told him. I'll handle things here. We've done what we needed to do. But as Alexander turned to leave, he noticed Elena's hands trembling slightly, as she made final adjustments to a garment. The pressure of the past few days, the constant scrutiny, and the legal threats were taking their toll. "Elena," he said softly, stepping closer. "How you don't have to prove anything to anyone. What you've created here, it's already remarkable." She looked up, and for a moment, her professional facade cracked. "I keep waiting for someone to expose me as a fraud, to prove that a girl from Queens who spent months cleaning offices has no right to be here." "You have every right to be here," Alexander replied firmly. "More than most of us who were handed our opportunities." Their eyes met, and the workshop's bustling activity seemed to fade away. Alexander found himself noticing details he'd been too busy to see before. The determined set of her jaw, the creative fire in her eyes, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity despite everything. The moment was broken by Mrs. Garcia clearing her throat. "The final pieces are ready for review." They spent the next hour examining each garment, making sure everything was perfect. The collection was more than just clothes. It was a statement about talent, opportunity, and the power of collaboration. As they prepared to leave for their respective battles, Alexander to the board meeting and Elena to oversee the final details, Mrs. Garcia pulled Alexander aside. "In 40 years of making clothes, I've never seen two people who complement each other like you and Elena," the older woman said wisely. "She has the vision, you have the means to make it reality. Together you could change everything." Alexander watched Elena directing the packing of the collection, her notebook ever present in her hands. She'd transformed from the quiet presence in his elevator to a force that was reshaping his company and his understanding of the fashion world. But as his car arrived to take him to the board meeting, a message from Marcus appeared on his phone. "Last chance to accept our offer. After today, there won't be a company left to save." The threat was clear, but for the first time in weeks, Alexander felt no fear. They had created something extraordinary in this small Brooklyn workshop, not just a fashion collection, but a new way of doing business, a new way of recognizing talent. As he left, Elena caught his eye and gave him a slight nod. No words were needed. They both knew that whatever happened in the next few hours would define not just their futures, but the future of fashion itself. The Sterling Fashion boardroom crackled with tension. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the concerned faces of board members as Alexander presented their new direction. Behind him, mannequins displayed key pieces from Elena's collection, their craftsmanship impossible to ignore. "This isn't just about saving our company," Alexander declared, gesturing to the designs. "It's about revolutionizing how we discover and nurture talent." Elena Martinez represents countless gifted designers who've been overlooked by our industry's outdated hierarchies. Marcus Reynolds leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Touching speech, Alexander, but our lawyers are prepared to prove these designs were derived from our stolen property." "Interesting theory," a new voice rang out. Elena stepped into the room, carrying her worn notebook. "Especially since I can prove every step of my design process, dating back months before your collection was even conceived." She opened her notebook, revealing dated sketches, material studies, and technical notes. "I also have witnesses, pattern makers, seamstresses, and workshop owners who watched these designs evolve from concept to reality." Charlotte Weber stepped forward, surprising everyone. "As head of Sterling's design department, I can confirm these are original works. The construction techniques alone are unique to Ms. Martinez's vision." Victoria Chen's composed facade cracked slightly. "This is absurd. You expect us to believe a cleaning lady created all this?" "Actually," Eleanor replied calmly, "I expect you to explain why your upcoming collection bears such striking similarities to my preliminary sketches. Sketches that were stored in Sterling's design vault before they mysteriously disappeared." The room fell silent as Elena projected images, comparing her original sketches with Reynolds Chen's announced designs. The similarities were undeniable, but Elena's versions showed a deeper understanding of construction and functionality. "Your versions won't even work in production," Elena continued. "You copied the aesthetics without understanding the technical innovations that make them possible." Ask your pattern makers. They must be struggling with the prototypes right now. Victoria's face paled, confirming Elena's words. Alexander watched the board members exchange glances, realizing the true extent of Reynolds Chen's deception. We don't need an injunction, Elena concluded. We welcome the comparison. Let the market decide which designs are authentic and which are pale imitations. As the board members huddled in intense discussion, Alexander and Elena stepped into his private office. The city sprawled below them, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this tower of power and fashion. That was quite a performance, Alexander said softly. You've been planning this confrontation for a while, haven't you? Elena smiled tiredly. I learned something during my months cleaning offices. People reveal their true selves when they think no one's watching. I saw how Marcus and Victoria operated, how they plotted against you. I just needed the right moment to expose them. Why me? Alexander asked the question that had been nagging at him. Why risk everything to save my company? Elena was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city. Because despite everything, Sterling Fashion still stands for something real in this industry. And because, she turned to face him, during our time in that elevator, I saw something in you. A willingness to see beyond surfaces, to recognize value in unexpected places. The air between them felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Before either could speak further, Alexander's assistant burst in. Sir, the board has reached a decision, and there's a situation in the lobby. The fashion press somehow found out about the collection. They're demanding a preview. Alexander and Eleanor shared a look. This was it, the moment that would define everything they'd worked for. The press wants a story? Eleanor's eyes sparked with determination. Let's give them one they'll never forget. They quickly formulated a plan. Instead of hiding from the media frenzy, they would embrace it. The impromptu preview would happen right there in the Sterling Fashion lobby, with Mrs. Garcia's workshop team demonstrating the garment's innovative construction in real time. As they rode the elevator down together, the same elevator where their story began, Alexander noticed Elena's hands fidgeting with her notebook. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. But sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most important changes. The elevator doors opened to reveal a lobby packed with fashion journalists, photographers, and industry insiders. Mrs. Garcia and her team had already begun setting up, transforming the corporate space into an atelier. Elena squared her shoulders, ready to step into the spotlight, but Alexander gently caught her arm. Whatever happens next, he said quietly, thank you for reminding me what real innovation looks like. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, both recognized how far they'd come from their first elevator encounter. They were no longer CEO and cleaning lady, but partners on the verge of changing their industry forever. The cameras began flashing as they stepped forward together, ready to show the world that true talent could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the biggest fashion revelations started with a simple elevator ride. The morning. After the impromptu showcase, Sterling Fashion's lobby was still buzzing with energy. Fashion blogs had exploded overnight with coverage of the event, and Elena Martinez was trending on social media. The story of the cleaning lady turned designer had captured the public's imagination. A revolutionary vision in fashion, Alexander read from Women's Wear Daily's headline. Sterling Fashion redefines industry standards with groundbreaking collection. Elena sat across from him in his office, still wearing her simple black dress from yesterday, looking both exhausted and exhilarated. The technical demonstrations were what won them over. When Mrs. Garcia showed how the garments were constructed, even the skeptics couldn't deny the innovation. The board just called, Alexander said, putting down his tablet. Reynolds Chen has withdrawn their injunction request and their merger proposal. Marcus and Victoria are facing serious questions from their own investors about the copied designs. And what about Sterling Fashion? The board has unanimously approved our new direction, including the establishment of an innovation incubator for undiscovered designers. Alexander smiled. They want you to lead it. Elena's eyes widened. Me? but I've never managed anything beyond a cleaning schedule. You managed to coordinate a network of independent workshops, win over our design team, and orchestrate one of the most talked about fashion presentations in recent history, Alexander countered. I'd say you're qualified. Before Elena could respond, Charlotte Weber entered with a group of young designers. They were carrying sketches and fabric samples, eager to show Elena their ideas. We've been thinking about your construction techniques, one of them said excitedly. The way you combine traditional craftsmanship with modern design, it opens up so many possibilities. Elena's face lit up as she examined their work, offering suggestions and encouragement. Alexander watched her natural ability to inspire and guide others, confirming his belief in her leadership potential. Later that afternoon, they visited Mrs. Garcia's workshop, where orders were already pouring in from luxury boutiques around the world. The small space had become a symbol of fashion's changing landscape. We've had to hire 5 new seamstresses, Mrs. Garcia announced proudly, and 3 other workshops in the neighborhood want to join our collective. As they walked through the busy workshop, Eleanor stopped to help a young apprentice with a particularly challenging seam. Her patience and expertise drew admiring looks from the seasoned craftspeople. You've started something remarkable here, Alexander said as they left the workshop. It's not just about the clothes anymore, it's about giving people opportunities they never had before. They decided to walk for a while, enjoying the Brooklyn streets as the sun began to set. The pressure of the past weeks was finally lifting, allowing them to see their achievement in a new light. I never thought this was possible, Elena admitted, watching children play in a nearby park. Growing up here, the fashion world seemed like another universe. Even when I got my scholarship, people made it clear I didn't belong. And now you're changing that world, Alexander replied, making it accessible to others who might have been overlooked. They stopped at a small cafe where they'd first discussed their production plans. The owner recognized them from the fashion news and insisted on serving them personally. My daughter wants to be a designer, the woman told Elena. She couldn't believe it when she saw your story. A Latina from Queens making it in high fashion? You've given her hope. Elena's eyes glistened with emotion as they found a quiet table. It's overwhelming. All these people looking up to me now. They see what I saw in that elevator, Alexander said softly. Someone who refused to let circumstances define their potential. Their eyes met across the table, and the connection between them felt stronger than ever. They were no longer just business partners fighting for survival. They'd become something more, something neither had expected. The press wants interviews, Elena said, breaking the moment. They're calling it a fashion fairy tale, the cleaning lady and the CEO who revolutionized the industry. Is that how you see it? Alexander asked, studying her face. No, she replied thoughtfully. I see it as proof that talent and determination can break through any barrier, but it shouldn't take a chance encounter in an elevator to make that possible. Then let's make sure it doesn't, Alexander proposed. The incubator program is just the beginning. We can create mentorship opportunities, training programs, partnerships with communities like this one. As they discussed their vision for the future, neither noticed the cafe had emptied around them. The owner dimmed the lights but left them deep in conversation, recognizing that something special was unfolding at that corner table. We should probably head back, Elena finally said, realizing how late it had gotten. There's still so much work to do. Alexander stood and offered his hand to help her up. When she took it, neither seemed eager to let go. They walked to his car in comfortable silence, both aware that their partnership had evolved into something neither had anticipated, but both treasured. As they drove back to Manhattan, the city lights sparkled like possibilities. Sterling Fashions. Building loomed ahead, no longer a symbol of corporate power but a beacon of transformation. They had not only saved a company, they had started a movement that would open doors for countless others. And somewhere in that building, an elevator still carried people up and down, perhaps creating other unexpected connections that would change lives in ways yet to be discovered. 3 months after the revolutionary showcase, Sterling Fashion's headquarters had undergone a dramatic transformation. The once sterile corporate environment now buzzed with creative energy. The entire 19th floor had been converted into the Sterling Innovation Hub, where emerging designers worked alongside seasoned craftspeople. Elena moved through the space with natural authority, her notebook replaced by a sleek tablet, though she still carried the old journal for sketching. Young designers from diverse backgrounds gathered around her workstation, eager to learn from the woman who had become a symbol of change in the fashion industry. "Remember," she advised a group, "reviewing designs, innovation isn't just about creating something new. It's about making something meaningful, something that honors both the craftspeople who create it and the people who will wear it." From his office, Alexander watched Elena mentor the new generation of designers. She had transformed from the quiet presence in his elevator to an industry powerhouse, yet maintained the humility and determination that had first drawn him to her. "The first collection from the Innovation Hub launches next week," his assistant reminded him. "The press is calling it the most anticipated fashion event of the year." "Any word from Reynolds Chen?" Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer. After the scandal of their copied designs, the rival company had undergone its own transformation. Marcus and Victoria had been forced to step down, and their new leadership had approached Sterling Fashion about collaboration rather than competition. "They want to participate in our mentorship program," his assistant confirmed. Apparently, their new CEO was quite impressed with Elena's vision for industry-wide change. Later that afternoon, Alexander found Elena in their favorite spot, the old design storage room where she had first revealed her sketches to him. Now it served as a quiet refuge from the bustling creativity of the hub. "Nervous about next week's launch?" he asked, joining her by the window. "Terrified," Elena admitted with a small smile. "But a different kind of terrified than before. Now it's not just about proving myself, it's about proving that this whole concept can work, that fashion can be both innovative and inclusive. The early orders suggest it's already working. Every piece from the Hub's first collection has been pre-sold, even the experimental designs." Elena turned to face him, her expression serious. "It's not just about sales, though, is it? Something bigger is happening here. Yesterday, I received letters from 3 different fashion schools asking me to speak about our apprenticeship program, and Mrs. Garcia's workshop collective has become a model for artisan communities across the country." Alexander stepped closer, drawn as always to her passionate conviction. "You've started a movement, Elena. The industry will never be the same." "We started a movement," she corrected him. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't been willing to risk everything on a crazy idea." The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the room, reminiscent of that first day when she'd shown him her designs. But now, instead of uncertainty and desperation, the air between them crackled with shared purpose and something deeper. "I've been thinking," Alexander said carefully, "about that elevator ride, about how random chances can change everything." "Random?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I thought we established that my presence in that elevator wasn't entirely coincidental." "True, but what was random was how it affected me, how you affected me." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I thought I was just saving my company, but I ended up discovering something far more valuable." Elena's breath caught slightly at the intensity in his voice. Before she could respond, a group of excited designers burst into the room. "Elena! Alexander! You have to see this!" They were carrying tablets displaying fashion news websites. The Paris Fashion Week Committee just announced their new inclusion initiative. They're citing Sterling Fashion as their inspiration. The moment between them paused, but didn't break as they reviewed the news. The prestigious Fashion Week was implementing changes that would open doors for undiscovered talents worldwide. "This is amazing," Elena breathed, scrolling through the announcement. "They're actually changing the system." "Because you showed them it was possible," Alexander replied softly. As the excited designers left to spread the news, Eleanor and Alexander found themselves alone again. The sun had set, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle outside the windows. "I never thanked you properly," Elena said suddenly. "For what?" "For seeing me, really seeing me. Not just as a cleaning lady with sketches, but as someone worth betting on." Alexander moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her voice. "Eleanor, you were never just anything. You were always extraordinary. I just had the good fortune to be stuck in an elevator with you long enough to realize it." Their eyes met, and the space between them seemed to disappear. All the months of working together, fighting together, transforming an industry together, had led to this moment. They were no longer CEO and designer or mentor and protege. They were simply two people who had found something unexpected and precious in each other. The lights of the city spread out below them like a carpet of stars, witnessing a moment that had been building since that first elevator ride. As they stood in the room where their journey had truly begun, both knew that their greatest transformation hadn't been in the fashion industry at all, but in themselves. And somewhere in the building, an elevator dinged, its doors opening to reveal new possibilities, new connections, new beginnings. For Alexander and Elena, it wasn't just their professional lives that had been revolutionized, it was their hearts. 1 year to the day after their fateful elevator encounter, Sterling Fashion's lobby was transformed for a special event. The space hummed with excitement as fashion industry leaders, designers, artisans, and media gathered for what Women's Wear Daily had dubbed the Fashion Revolution's first anniversary. Elena stood backstage, making final adjustments to the showcase that would celebrate the Sterling Innovation Hub's achievements. The exhibition featured not just clothing, but stories, tales of designers discovered, artisans empowered, and communities transformed. "Everything's ready," Mrs. Garcia announced, approaching Elena with a proud smile. Her workshop collective, now a thriving enterprise, had become a cornerstone of Sterling's new manufacturing approach. Though I still can't believe how much has changed in just 1 year. The changes were indeed remarkable. The Sterling Innovation Hub had launched 3 successful collections, each one pushing boundaries while maintaining the highest standards of craftsmanship. More importantly, it had sparked an industry-wide movement. Other major fashion houses had followed their lead, creating their own incubator programs and partnering with local artisan communities. Ms. Martinez, a young design student, approached nervously. "I just wanted to thank you. Your scholarship program, it's giving people like me a real chance." Elena smiled warmly, remembering her own journey. The Sterling Fashion Education Initiative, which she had founded with Alexander, was already providing opportunities to dozens of talented students from underprivileged backgrounds. "Just promise me one thing," Elena told the student. "When you succeed, remember to hold the door open for others." As the exhibition opening approached, Elena found a quiet moment to visit the elevator where everything had begun. Standing inside, she could almost feel the echo of that night, the fear, the hope, the beginning of something extraordinary. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," Alexander's voice came from the doorway. He stepped inside and the doors closed, giving them a moment of privacy. "Feeling nostalgic?" he asked softly. "Grateful," Elena corrected. "That night I was so focused on proving myself, on fighting for recognition. I never imagined we'd end up transforming the entire industry." Alexander moved closer. You know, I've never told you this, but that night, when you started talking to distract me from my claustrophobia, it was the first time in years someone had seen past my title to the person underneath." "And I never told you," Eleanor replied, "that when you really looked at my designs, it was the first time someone had seen past my circumstances to who I could become." The elevator hummed quietly around them, a familiar comfort now rather than a source of anxiety. Through the glass walls, they could see the city stretching out before them, full of possibility. "The board meeting went well?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer from his smile. "Unanimously approved. Sterling Fashion will be expanding the Innovation Hub model globally. Paris, Milan, Tokyo, each with their own incubator programs, each partnering with local artisan communities." "And Reynolds Chen?" "Their new leadership is fully on board. They're contributing to the scholarship fund and opening their manufacturing facilities to our apprenticeship program." Elena shook her head in amazement. "A year ago they were trying to destroy us. Now they're partners in changing the industry." That's what real revolution looks like, Alexander said. Not just fighting the old system, but creating a better, one that even your former opponents want to join. The elevator reached the lobby level, but neither moved to exit. Through the glass doors, they could see the gathering crowd, the exhibition displays, the future they had built together. You know, Alexander said, taking Elena's hand, we never did finish our conversation from that first night. Which part? Elena asked, though her soft smile suggested she knew. The part about dreams. You told me everyone deserves a chance to pursue theirs. What I never got to tell you was that sometimes we find dreams we didn't even know we had. Elena turned to face him fully, like a CEO discovering he wanted to change the fashion industry, like a CEO discovering that success means nothing without someone to share it with, someone who challenges him, inspires him, makes him see the world differently. The moment stretched between them, filled with a year's worth of shared battles, victories, and growing feelings that had transformed from professional respect to something much deeper. Ms. Martinez, an assistant's voice came through the intercom. The exhibition opening begins in 5 minutes. Elena squeezed Alexander's hand. Ready to show the world what fashion can really be? With you, always. They stepped out of the elevator together, no longer CEO and former cleaning lady, but equal partners in both business and life. The lobby had been transformed into a celebration of creativity, craftsmanship, and possibility. Designs from the Innovation Hub were displayed alongside stories of the artisans who created them. Students from their scholarship program mingled with industry veterans, while Mrs. Garcia demonstrated traditional techniques to fascinated onlookers. As they prepared to address the gathering, Elena felt Alexander's reassuring presence beside her. They had done more than save a company or launch a successful collection. They had proven that talent could emerge from anywhere, that tradition and innovation could work hand in hand, and that sometimes the most powerful transformations began with a simple elevator ride. The audience fell silent as they stepped forward together. Elena looked out at the faces before her, designers, artisans, students, journalists, all part of the change they had started. Her journey from cleaning floors to revolutionizing an industry had been extraordinary, but the greatest discovery had been finding someone who shared her vision of what fashion could be. As she began to speak, Elena's voice carried the confidence of someone who had found not just success, but purpose. The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft chime, a reminder of where their story had begun. But this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, the start of a new chapter in their personal and professional journey together. The fashion world would never be the same, and neither would they, and that was exactly as it should be.